Hey there, I hope you're staying warm. Boy, it's really been something, hasn't it? Well, we're still in John chapter 12, and Jesus has raised Lazarus from the dead, and there's all kinds of stuff that's happened because of that. And so in verse 9 of chapter 12, we're kind of still talking about it, but you might remember that Mary, the sister of Lazarus, anointed the feet of Jesus with costly perfume. And Judas complained and said it should have been sold and the money given to the poor. And that wasn't the case at all. He was a crook and he wanted the money for himself. And, sometimes you see these commercials that you kind of wonder, okay, is this really going to get to some Holocaust survivor in Russia? By the way, the Holocaust was over in 1945. Haven't they got their stuff together by then? But anyway, sorry about the rabbit. Here we are, John chapter 12, verses 9 through 11. Okay. A large crowd of the Jews learned that he was there at Mary and Martha and Lazarus' house. And they came not for Jesus' sake only, but that they might also see Lazarus, whom he raised from the dead. But the chief priests planned to put Lazarus to death also, because on account of him, many of the Jews were going away and were believing in Jesus. And remember, back in chapter 11, they said, if people start following him, the Romans are going to take away our place and our name. So their motive was pride and power. Judas' motive was greed. And those are the two main things that Jesus speaks about so much in the New Testament. The greed thing, he sets that aside by itself. It says the deceitfulness of riches. And in Matthew chapter 18, verse 3, he says you got to humble yourself like a little child to enter the kingdom of heaven, and whoever humbles himself the most is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And so pride and greed, motive. Well, what's your motive for living? 1 Corinthians chapter 13 says no matter what you do, the motive needs to be love. We need to be under the control of the Spirit of God. And 1 John 4:8 says God is love. That's the one word that describes his character. You have the fruit of his Spirit that's all listed out. But if you want to describe God in one word, love describes his character. And so, what was Mary's motive when she poured the perfume on Jesus' feet? Love. What was Judas' motive when he made the statement about giving it to the poor? Greed. What was the Pharisees' motive when they said, we need to put Lazarus to death too? Pride. Pride, greed, love, you've pretty well described all of humanity. And so every believer needs to do what David did in Psalm 139, verse 23. On a regular basis, we need to say, Lord, search my heart. Try my thoughts. In other words, tell me what you see. Tell me what you see. Because these aren't statements so that we can judge the Pharisees and judge Judas. These are statements so that we can use the Word of God and let the Spirit of God show us what he sees and judge ourselves. Have a great day.